In this episode of the PM Podcast, I will introduce you to flow. It'll help you get everyone on your project moving in the same direction, and they'll love it.
Hello and welcome back to the Project Management Podcast at pm-podcast.com. This is episode number 451 and I'm Cornelius Fichtner. Thank you for joining me today. Last week, I must have missed the start of at least 3 scheduled meetings. In each case, I saw it on my calendar, and I saw that the meetings would start in about an hour or less. And that meant I could probably start and finish another task before I had to be at those meetings. And each time I got so involved in the task I was working on that I totally lost track of everything around me, and the meetings started without me. In positive psychology, this is called a flow state, also known colloquially as being in the zone. This is the mental state in which a person performing an activity is fully immersed in a feeling of energized, focused, full involvement and enjoyment of the process of the activity. In essence, flow is characterized by the complete absorption in what one does, and a resulting transformation in one's senses of time. Now, wouldn't it be great if we could apply this to all our projects and everyone working on it? Just imagine how much we could get done. Well, you can. But first, if you are preparing for your PMP exam, then the best way to calm your butterflies in your stomach is to take a practice exam. Our PMP exam simulator offers several such practice exams. To see how it works and take a free test drive, please go to freeexamsimulator.com. And to see how flow can be applied to our projects, we are welcoming Andrew Kallman to the program. He and his brother Ted Kallman wrote the book Flow, Get Everyone Moving in the Right Direction and Loving It. And Andrew is here today to give us an introduction. Here is how someone describes the effect that flow has had on their projects. Flow is when you know where you are headed, know what your goal is, and know the steps necessary to get there. It's like running a race. You don't plan each step along the way, but you keep your eyes on the finish line, and everything you do moves you towards it thanks to your training. And now, enjoy the interview. Hello, Andrew, and welcome to the Project Management Podcast.
Hi, Cornelius. Thanks.
So before we begin, what can our listeners expect to learn from our discussion today that will help them manage and lead their projects?
They'll be able to, hopefully at the end of this interview, have a couple of tools that they can take and begin to use immediately in their daily work that will help them increase their odds of having a successful project, whether they have tight budgets, a tight timeline, or if they have a challenging scope.
The book that you and your brother wrote is called Flow, Get Everyone Moving in the Right Direction and Loving It. And my obvious first question, what is flow?
That's a great question, Cornelius. That's actually one of the things that we've put into flow is that it's basically the optimization of what you're trying to achieve. So it optimizes what you're doing.
And how did you get involved with flow to begin with? What was the start?
Wow, that goes back a long time. All of my brothers and I, we were actually basketball players. And we first heard about flow from one of our coaches that we worked with. And he told us about a psychologist in Chicago that was teaching at one of the universities there. And I'll probably massacre his name. So Dr. Csikszentmihalyi, I hope you forgive me, but Mihai was the one that came up with the idea of flow. And he applied it to individual flow and team flow. And so it was really interesting being in basketball. It was like, wow, how can we take those ideas and apply them to business and to our projects?
Yeah, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, I think his book is called Flow, just Flow, right? So very similar concept, but I believe he focuses on the flow that you personally get into. Like when something really happening, for example, you're doing some work and suddenly you snap out of it and it's 2 hours later and things just worked, it flowed, it was just fantastic the way this went. I think that's sort of the general concept, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like achieving that state of optimal high performance. And if an individual on a team can enter into flow, often he's able to help the rest of the team come with. And all of a sudden, everything that you're doing, every shot that goes up, goes in, your team gets every rebound. And it's the same thing in projects or working with teams. Is if one person enters into a state of optimal, sustainable high performance, they tend to bring everybody else with.
So from the point after you were trained in flow, what was the biggest success that you had in using flow as part of managing one of your projects? How did it help you?
That is included in our book. It's one of the case studies. It's the Singtel case study is the one that I'm thinking about. And we had a project where the forecasts were dismal. They were projecting that it was going to be double the budget in 2 additional years, above and beyond the 3 years that they had budgeted. And came in working with the team and realized that these team members had been working between 60 and 80 hours a week for 2 years. And it was just like, oh my, this is going to be a disaster. If this keeps up, they're all going to burn out.
Yeah.
And so I was able to, using flow in 90 days, turn the team around, turn the project around, and help them actually deliver the project 7 months earlier than planned, with savings of multiple millions of Singapore dollars. And the executives there were just delighted because nobody thought the project was going to succeed. And so we took something that was up in flames, and I worked on it directly, and Ted was coaching me in the background. And we were able to do a lot of different things directly in a project that no one thought that we could win. So that is one of the 13 case studies that we include in Flow, our latest book. It's the other case studies are equally as impressive. It's always fun to work with Flow. And so that's probably the biggest success that I've had, where I was basically implementing Flow all by myself on my own, halfway around the world from the US.
And did you have some sort of a personal aha moment at some point? You know, many people out there, when they're listening to this, they're going to go, yeah, it's just another kind of methodology that I could apply. But, you know, what was it for you when you thought, you know what, this actually works. This is really great.
Well, it was probably along the same time as when we were able to go out and start duplicating our successes in project after project, program after program, portfolio after portfolio. That's when we were like, oh, we've got something that people can duplicate. And we've had other people that we've trained in Flow that have done the exact same thing, and they've been able to recreate delivering remarkable results in their projects. And so that's, for me, that's been like one of the key personal aha moments for Flow.
So let's jump into it. Maybe let's start with a tool. Could you give me an example of one of the tools that you use from Flow and how this would be applied and help on a project so that the project manager can be more successful?
Absolutely. One of those is the flow friction analysis.
Flow
And
friction analysis. All right.
yes,
Tell me about that.
it was originally called the flow formula. Okay. It was like vision plus the right people plus the 4D model equals flow. Okay. And so breaking that down, we realized that, for example, people may not know what the 4D model is. That's define, distill, deliver, and drive. So that's an iterative pattern and model that we put over every project in order to mitigate a lot of the things that we run into in projects. So here's what the friction analysis looks like. If you don't have vision, typically you'll have anarchy that flares up. If you don't have the right people, you're going to have team members, including maybe the person that knows that they're not the right person. There's going to be a high level of anxiety that's created because of that. If you don't have the right definitions, and I used to teach PMI, PMPs when they were taking their certification tests. One of the key things I taught them, I used to teach the project managers, look, guys, if you don't get the definitions right, there's a high potential you're going to die for this project. And so without the right definitions, you're going to experience confusion on the team. Now, this is maybe one of the most powerful parts that every methodology out there misses. And we call it distillation. But in reality, when we talk about distillation, we talk about distilling agreement. Because if you don't distill agreement, not only with the team members, but with all the stakeholders, you're going to have politics rear its ugly head. And it's been amazing in the last 25, 30 years to watch how many times a really good project has been wiped out due to politics. And so distilling agreement is the second D of the 4D model. In the third D, which is we call deliver, if your team doesn't have the capability to deliver, you're going to experience chaos. I've even seen that in the last 5 years. I was working with an AI company, and their idea of how to get everything done was to lock 40 developers in a room and have everybody yell at each other for the weekend. And then they would launch something and spend the next 3 months cleaning up all the bugs. But it was utter chaos. And so if you don't have that ability to deliver, you end up with chaos. And then the last D is drive. And these days we do that via retrospectives if you're using Agile, or if you're using gates, you can do gate review. That becomes the point in time where you drive either the project or the program. And if you don't do that one correctly, you can end up with either division or it can really spin off the table. And what's interesting about the word division, it literally means two visions. And so if you're trying to drive your project and you've got multiple visions that are competing, that's going to be tough. And that takes you back to politics, and it takes you all the way back to the first one, which was vision. So that's the flow friction analysis. I've had a number of my project managers and coaches tell me, I use this one almost every day in my work, because I'll have team members come to me and they'll go, oh man, I'm really anxious because so-and-so, they're not able to get their work done. Or they'll come in and just say, I'm really confused about what we're supposed to deliver, and things like that. So it's become a very powerful tool. And this sort of aligns with Peter Drucker, where he said only 3 things happen naturally in organizations: friction, confusion, and underperformance. Everything else requires leadership.
So if I understand this correctly, you're using the tool for the clarification of what the real issue is and what should I be focused on to ID and then solve the problem?
Exactly, exactly. It's like a little radar that you can just go, oh, do I hear confusion coming up? Boom. I know that it's because we didn't get our definitions correct. Okay, let's go back and look at our definitions. And you can help get the team back on track doing that. And it's the same for vision. It's really important to have the vision visible for the team so that they know what it is that they're trying to shoot for. And so we'll use these different tools in order to get everybody moving the same direction.
Mm-hmm. Now, my research into flow, my readings into flow, our discussion so far, it looks very easy, deceptively simple almost. What would you say to our listeners, all of them project managers, who would dismiss flow and say, well, I'm not going to use this on my project because that just sounds too good. It seems too simple. What would you tell them?
Oh, I love that. I don't know if people are familiar with the Stacy diagram, where if you've seen that, where they have the requirements versus the other part on the other axis, and they have simple, complicated, complex, and chaos. When you simplify something, we've spent 25 years honing these models and tools in the real world fires of projects. So we know they work. And so, yeah, it's deceptively simple. I love that question because it is. When people look at it, they go, oh, that's intuitively obvious. Yes, it's simple, but it's just not easy to do. And you need to have the battle scars to understand what we're talking about here, because sometimes those things that are deceptively simple are exactly the things you need to do in order to succeed.
So, since it is so deceptively simple, what would you say to project managers who are using Agile as part of their methodology? Can they use flow in Agile? Because, it's not mentioned in the Scrum guide, so we can't use it.
Well, actually, flow aligns with the 12 principles of the Agile Manifesto plus
Good.
The values. And on top of that, Ted did an interview with a CIO here back in December where we didn't realize that CIO who came to our flow training 5 years ago, that he went back and used it with his teams who were already agile. And in 90 days, he measured a 300% increase in the team's productivity over from when they started 3 months before, using flow on top of Agile.
And how do you build critical mass with flow? Because, it seems so deceptively simple. You have to bring a lot more people into this, right? It's almost a shift in mindset.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And that's a great question because there's multiple tools that we use to build critical mass. It's a lot of communications, it's stakeholder management, and it's also distilling agreement, okay? And so the way we do stakeholder management is slightly different in that we use and we go through this in our training, but we use a plus, minus, and a zero for each person. Basically, are they for the project? Are they neutral to the project? Or are they against the project? And by doing that, and when you map all those stakeholders, you get a good idea of what you need to do from a campaign management standpoint, how to use flow to communicate out to your allies, out to the ones that are neutral that you might be able to flip, and the ones that are negative, you may never be able to swing anyways. And so you're always going to be up against that, especially in larger corporations, but managing that correctly by getting your allies on board and the neutrals on board. Those that are against, if that's what we mean by critical mass, is getting the pluses and the neutrals together on our side so that we can offset any of the negative things coming from the people who are against us. And so that's one way that we do build critical mass with flow in order to help the team to succeed.
And what about culture in the company? How does flow help you manage and navigate cultural headwinds and build alignment?
That's a really good question. I can give an example of what we just did here last year in 2019. We were working in a very large organization, a manufacturer, doing a couple of agile pilots because they wanted to start to get a better feel for how do you use agile in a manufacturing, highly engineering oriented environment. And we worked with one team that was producing a unit for the automobile that included engineers, optical engineers, electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, and so on, all of those different teams, plus product marketing and the business and sales, and they were with. And so a lot of times you'll run into cultural headwinds where walking into that kind of environment, people, when we walked in, they were going, oh, this will never work. These teams won't succeed. This is going to be, business as usual. Well, the first team, they were able to deliver 32 product configurations in the first 12 weeks. The standard for that kind of team, for that kind of product, was they might have delivered 5 or 6. So we had a 6-fold increase in the productivity with that team, despite the cultural headwinds. And then everyone else in the organization are snapping their heads going, how did you do that? And the other team, that was a longer project, and it was at a higher level with executives on this team. And nobody thought that team was going to work at all. It was a rollout of a pretty major tool. The previous division that rolled out that tool was only able to get 2 products loaded in it in 3 years. Our team, in 12 months, from when we started to when they delivered, were able to get 6 products into the system. So that's like almost like a 9 or 12-fold increase. And everybody was blown away because they thought, oh, this will never work, especially when you consider the cultural headwinds that we were dealing with leadership teams. And so the cultural headwinds, you're always going to run into them. You just have to be prepared on how to use which tool from Flow to mitigate whatever it is that you're up against.
It's an excellent segue, because so far we've mostly focused on the project manager and how to use it on projects. But you mentioned, everyone else in the company. So let's take a look at the other people in the company. In particular, what would you say to an executive or maybe even a business owner who is planning on attending the Flow training?
That's the best investment that they can make, that the leadership
I knew you would say something like that.
Yeah, exactly. But it is. We've found that about 8-9 years ago, when I went to MPG, Nature Publishing Group, and I joined them for almost 3 years, in my interviews with the CTO, the COO, and the CEO in London, I just made it very clear to them. I said, look, I'm happy to come on board, do your agile transformation, and work with the development teams and get everybody going. But one of the prerequisites for me to come with is everybody gets trained, even if it's only a half-day training in Flow. And they agreed. And so everybody from the CEO all the way down to the 18 teams, over 250 people in that organization, from the teams all the way to the top, including some board members, were trained in Flow. And about 1.5 years in, the board members are looking at each other and they're going, have you noticed the way that our communication has changed during this last 1.5 years? And after watching this for 1.5 years, they're going, oh my goodness, what he told us was true. We really will start getting the increases we were talking about. And so it was great, because when I came in, they had all the baselines. So I was able to look at how many projects that they achieved in 2010. They did 58 projects on the average medium-sized projects. Using roughly the same measure, almost 2.5 years later, they were able to deliver 124 projects a year. So their project backlog, when I arrived, was, I think, 260 projects. When I left 3 years later, they were on track to deliver 290 plus projects. So they cleared out the backlog and delivered 10% more. And from a budget standpoint, that means that what would have taken them 4.5 years, they delivered in 3. That savings just on budget, just on the teams, was well over $20 million. And so they were slightly happy about that.
Does flow work in other cultures as well? And by other cultures, I mean, other types of businesses, other areas of the world, because I think most of the examples and case studies we talked about right now are sort of Western oriented.
Yes, absolutely. We've been using, I should say I have been using Flow. I'm based here in Finland. So I've been using Flow now in Scandinavia and Europe for the better part of the last 20 years. And what's interesting, and that's a great question, because it actually is interesting to see, because I get this all the time, especially here in Europe, and they say, well, that will work in Sweden because they're all collaborative. But here in Finland, we're hierarchical and that's never going to work. Then they try it and they go, oh, it worked. I got the exact same questions in Singapore with the teams that I trained there. I had trained Singtel and Citibank in Singtel. So one was a telecom, one was in finance. And so when you start looking at national cultures, it's really interesting that flow seems to be agnostic to the culture. It still works because we're finding that at its core, people are still people. And the techniques that work in America work in Europe, and they also work in Asia and the Middle East. And so wherever you're at on the planet, we're relatively confident that flow cuts across both business and national culture. And what's really fun about this is, and that's why the projects I worked on last year were so fun, because over and over again, we're told, oh, well, this won't work in a manufacturing engineering environment, when in reality, it does. And so that was really fun to be able to see that and watch that flow actually worked in something like manufacturing, because we've worked with IT, we've worked with insurance, finance, banking, telecoms, a lot of services, consulting companies, and so on. But to be able to have used it successfully in a manufacturing, high engineering environment and see the same success, that was awesome.
And how has flow impacted your work life since you started using it?
I would say it's the ability to walk in to any project or assignment and feel fully confident based on the tool set that I have in flow of being able to say, yep, we're going to succeed. And so, and it's not that we're trying to say, oh, I'm super good or anything like that, but it gives confidence regardless of the situation or assignment that you're working on. I've got the tools I know work, and that I can duplicate that over and over and over again, so that when I'm done, the organization is standing there scratching their head going, how did he do that? So that's how it's impacted my work life, because I've been doing this for 25 years now. My brother Ted, my brother Dan, and I worked together all the way back in 95 on a project together. And that was the origin of flow, what we call flow today.
When you train people in an organization on flow, like the company that you mentioned earlier with the 250 some people training, how long does it take until the concept actually takes hold within the company so that, you can tell, okay, they got it, they're actually using it every day?
Well, that's a great question. It actually takes about 3 sprints. So what's that, a month and a half? Okay, where we can start measuring the results. 3 to 6 sprints. And so a month and a half to 3 months is what I would say that it would take. Because at this last company, it was beautiful because we came in, we had the teams that were coming together. We did a day and a half of flow-based agile training for the teams who had been working traditional before then. And so we did a day and a half, taking them through our training, or was it 2.5? Whatever. I think it was a day and a half. We didn't have that many days. And then the last half day we spent doing a workshop building their product backlogs, which we would call work breakdown structures in project management. But we put together their product backlogs for them. And then that was like a Thursday and a Friday. And then on Monday, we went right into using everything that we just taught them. And so it was beautiful. We went straight from training into actual use on the following Monday. And then it was just to coach and mentor, and sometimes do refresher training and then coach and mentor. And when you're able to do that, it really adds tremendous value to the organization, and it gets them going very quickly. And so both of those teams were achieving what I would call true distillation at about 3 sprints into applying what we had just taught them.
All right.
So it's pretty fast.
Yeah, it's very quick. So 3 sprints in, you have it, it works for your company, but then you have to keep the momentum going because we humans have a tendency to fall back to our old habits. So How does flow help the teams to continuously improve and keep the flow flowing, so to speak?
Well, we had the fortunate position of having agile coaches on site, and I was working with the coaches and the customers' project managers and program managers. We were able to continuously coach the teams, and to keep them focused, we had made sure that each team had the vision on the wall, the mission on the wall, and each sprint, the goals that got us one step closer to fulfilling the vision for that product or for that platform that they were rolling out. So, the only way to keep the teams going forward is make sure that everybody is reminded often. Hopefully at the end of every sprint, when you do the retrospective, you would go back and you would say, how did these steps get us one step closer to delivering the vision? And by constantly keeping vision out there and visible, big and visible in front of the team, it helps keep that momentum going.
To close our interview, what tips would you give to a project manager who wants to use flow, but, the company doesn't necessarily give them the support that they would need for this? They're not going to send all 250 people. In fact, they're going to send nobody to the flow training. But still, I have a project. I want to use it. What tip do you have for me?
Well, for that project manager, I've had a lot of people in that situation, by the way, where they feel like they're out in the desert. For them, I coach them and I mentor them that you need to use the tools, deliver the results, and over time, as you deliver those results, you create that level of credibility with the organization that they start to go, how does he or she continue to be able to deliver consistently on projects that everybody thought were going to die? And so by taking your results from, for example, if we look at the statistics in traditional project management, let's say, anywhere from 14 to 16% of the project succeed. If you pull that up to agile results level and suddenly you're delivering at over 40% success, you will get the attention of your organization, and they'll start going, hey, what's going on? How did you do that? And then it gives them the opportunity to start to make the case for, maybe you guys need to be looking at using this methodology, this framework, and these tool sets and mindset. I've been using it with my team, and here's the results. And it's something that individually, when you start being able to do that as a project manager, it makes you more and more valuable, not just to your existing organization, but to other organizations. And so I've helped a lot of project managers along the way. I had one person in New York City that worked with me at Nature Publishing Group, and she was able to make a couple jumps in a couple of years to 2 different companies, and she doubled her income. And now I just saw recently she's been promoted to a director of program management. And so and that's in a 10-year period of time. So she was able to turbocharge her career by taking the principles of flow and consistently delivering remarkable value. People are going, oh, we need that too. Come on over. And so that's what I would say to the poor project manager that's out there feeling like they're in the desert going, is there anybody there? And so, yeah, that would be my tip to them.
All right. The book, once again, is called Flow. Get everyone moving in the right direction and loving it. It was written by Ted Kallman and Andrew Kallman, and it is 239 pages long. Andrew, thank you so much for being on the program today. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Cornelius. It was really great to be here. Thanks, everybody.
Andrew Kallman is an enterprise and executive coach and author. And that's it. Thank you very much for listening. Please visit pm-podcast.com for show notes, links, transcripts, and PDU information. Our email address is info@pm-podcast.com. And finally, we have this. At your next project meeting, try lightening the mood by saying, I totally agree. We need to waste more time on this. Until next time.